Welcome to C-Suite Scale, where executive minds unpack the real stories behind business growth. Today, I am joined by Dom Singer, who is the VP of Cybersecurity and Advanced Services at Eden Data. Welcome.
Hi, great to be here.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining. Super excited to have you on the show here today. Why don't we just start out with just telling a brief introduction about yourself and your company?
Sure. So I've been in the game of cybersecurity and IT for about 25 years, done a lot of different things, cut my teeth in the Army, running battlefield networks, and then from there, many years doing a lot of different roles, either designing, implementing, or operating enterprise all the way down to mid-size security programs, always with a risk-based perspective. And a lot of different things I've done, technical space, but I won't bore you with those details. Here at Eden Data, what we do is we focus on the startup community, typically cloud native organizations, and we help them most oftentimes start with building a compliance readiness program. We build into the audit delivery experience, and then we go from there and expand into designing and building a resilient cybersecurity architecture.
Wow, that's amazing. So, how did the vision evolve and come about for you?
It's a long story, but the founder is Taylor Hersom, and I had met him at a previous organization, and we just hit it off really well. I loved his mindset, the way he was approaching it. He and I thought very similarly about the market space, as well as how existing and legacy professional services firms approach the market space. And so we wanted to start something different. He came here, started the company, and then shortly thereafter had recruited me. And so that's the short version. And there's more to the story, but the idea really is bringing a whole different paradigm to the operations, to delivering operations around virtual chief information security officer services, as well as compliance readiness services.
Well, that's great. So, kind of tell me what your competitive differentiator is. What makes you unique?
I think it's our people. Fundamentally, it's definitely our people, because in the services space, it's all about the experience that you can deliver. And that experience is completely predicated on the people. And then, of course, from there, we have a methodology and an approach that we bring them to the place. But the whole idea is really, are we focusing on our people? Are we taking care of them? Are we building the right environment for them to deliver that experience for our clients? And then more specifically, it's really understanding what is our client environment like? What's their risk appetite? What's the context of where they're operating, where are they trying to go with their business, and not coming into one size fits all security program, but really designing and building it for the context of their environment.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm really making sure it's customized, but first making sure that your internal team is in a really good headspace and position, so that way they can put their best foot forward.
You got it. And then also giving them the ecosystem to have other folks that they can bring in depending on what the client is asking about, whether it's more deeper architecture conversations or something specific in privacy, for example.
That's so great. And so, talk to me a little bit about some of these things that you've implemented with your internal team just to make sure that they're all really sharp and ready to go.
It's always a work in progress as a startup and as a bootstrap startup. So that's the other good benefit that we have, is that we are bootstrapped. We don't have to answer to VC, with great respect to the VC firms that are out there. We don't have to answer to shareholders, with great respect to shareholders in large companies. But the point is that we get to make our own decisions. And so the enablement really comes down to the tools that we're bringing and always looking at, are the tools most efficient? How do we incorporate other capabilities that our tools can work with each other, so that the team very quickly has the right knowledge at hand and has the right experience of the tools themselves in order to deliver that experience. I don't know if that helps you, but I can go a little more detail.
Yeah, no, absolutely it does. Making sure everybody's equipped. And the startup environment's really exciting for a lot of those reasons that you just mentioned, because there's not as much red tape. There's a little bit more that you have that personal control over. When the organization gets so big and those layers get involved, it's a little bit harder to drive what you're trying to accomplish, more or less.
You got it, Brenda. And actually, from there, I'm going to pivot into our customer base. And we focus primarily on the startup and scale up marketplace. And what's beautiful about that, having come from enterprise world, is, to your point, we don't really have to unwind red tape. We get to build the program from scratch. So that is a beautiful place to be in for anybody out there that's ever had to deal with the larger security programs. Sometimes you run into decisions that were made or solutions that were purchased that may not have been the best choice for the organization. So we're able to be in that driver's seat from the very beginning to really nail down, again, back to your risk appetite, back to your operating context, back to your budget. Where are you today? Where are you trying to go tomorrow? Let's build a foundation for today so that we can get you where you need to go for tomorrow.
I love that. Really customizing it based off of what you're hearing with the customer.
You got it.
So, talk to me a little bit about what your current process is for finding new customers.
We primarily rely on partnerships, and surprisingly enough, we also have a great CMO, and he has done an excellent job of positioning us in the market with a lot of different capabilities. I won't talk to you about too much here, but the short version is we rank really high in Google. We also rank really high. We've had leads coming in from ChatGPT, where clients have found us on ChatGPT, which is interesting in this day and age. And we're doing some more intelligence gathering around where that came from and how that happens. But so it's a combination of a little bit of marketing. We don't do a lot of outbound because we just have a great influx from our partner network, and that's primarily where we focus for our leads.
That's amazing. Channel partners are so valuable for that exact reason because they know you know their customers, they know your business, and so they're really probably able to position you in a really strong light.
Exactly. And they also have confidence because, as you know, in selling, you can't sell if you can't have the confidence about what the service is that's being delivered. So they know from the experience of it by being our partner and seeing how we implement and operate those security programs and how happy the clients are with those outcomes, they know that they can reliably present us as a lead that they want to introduce to their client base.
Absolutely. And so I imagine that your market that you go after, I mean, everyone needs more security in anything that they do, but is that leave it pretty broad or is there a specific niche or market that you focus on?
Great question, Brenda. So the short version is that we really lead with compliance readiness. And in the startup community, oftentimes they're trying to sell to enterprise or mid markets, and those organizations very rightfully are asking about their security posture, which typically is validated by a compliance certificate or accreditation, if you will. SOC 2 is a big driver of our business. ISO 27001, we're leaning into 42001 for AI organizations, and this helps them present their security posture, but also lay the groundwork for that foundation I mentioned earlier, because always in the back of our mind at Eden Data, we're thinking about resilience. And resilience means you have the right amount of security controls in place, you're continually evaluating and monitoring and investing in it in the right areas, and expecting that at some point in time, you're going to have a problem, a weakness, or something that gets identified. And that's what resilience means, is that you have the right perspective, the right foundations, and the ability to understand where those weaknesses are to be able to invest and shore them up over time.
And so, how are you just going about staying two steps ahead?
It's not an easy thing. That's, again, I tend to abuse the phrase a little bit, but I really talk about resilience very often because if you have the right components, and I'll use NIST CSF, the Cybersecurity Framework, as a good example, they have this mindset of governance, identify, protect, detect, respond. And then you've got recovery as well. But the idea is if you have these different areas all put together and you have this mindset as you're building your security program, you really are building in this capability for resilience. And resilience, again, just simply means that no such thing as perfect security, but let's build good enough. And good enough means let's nail the right foundations with those different areas I just mentioned. Let's have really good governance, which is that continuous feedback loop, and let us understand where are our gaps. And if we happen to have an issue, let's go back through that cycle of identify to really understand where are those gaps, what changes do we need to make in the rest of that wheel, and to continually improve. So that's the idea. It's a back to resilience, and it's just a theme that we always drive home with our clients.
Yeah, that's great. Sounds like it continues to go back to just overall customization.
Yes, indeed, for sure. And then, of course, as they grow, right, for today's SOC 2 might be all that they need, but then their clients might become more demanding. They may ask more specific, nuanced questions around the security posture, and those tend to drive other improvements or investments that they need to make in order to win that business.
No, I love that. I love that. So I imagine you even alluded to this a little bit so far, but having to pivot throughout the journey when you try something new and then having to try, if it's not working the way that you had originally intended, having to go a different route. Tell me about some examples where you've had to do that and you've reached success by pivoting
As an organization or for our clients?
for your clients.
So for our clients, I would say 42001 is the best example of that, or even 27001. Let me use 27001 as an easier example. SOC 2 is primarily North America, maybe a little bit of central, it's America-based credential. When organizations go internationally, they don't really recognize, their customers don't really recognize or appreciate the value of SOC 2, and that's where something like ISO 27001 is very important because for them to meet that marketplace, they are going to be asked about something more international like an ISO 27001, which establishes a more formal information security management system than SOC 2 does. And so that would be a pivot that they have to make, and they have to make more investments in getting a more robust security program established than just what SOC 2 outlines.
Okay, awesome. That's really great. And then how about as a company, like as you've grown and scaled and things that you've learned along the way, what are some of the biggest things that maybe other business owners could probably learn from you?
As with any company, it's always about efficiency, right? And that's always the challenge, especially as a startup. How do you spend the right money on the right tools? And there are certainly choices that you make along the way that maybe you need to abandon, right? We did that in the early days, whether it was project management tools or other tools. And then how do you incorporate those into higher organizational goals? And so that's an area that we're always looking at, is how do we become more efficient in delivering our experience for our employees, and then obviously the outcomes for our clients. So that's probably the biggest thing that we're looking at, is how do we really continually to evaluate the way that we're delivering our services and get a lot crisper on the way that we are presenting our programs and delivering and designing our programs for our clients.
Yeah. And so let's go back a little bit to making sure that your entire team internally is aligned with all of these changes and initiatives, especially in front of the customers as the customers grow. Like, how do you go about that, making sure that everybody's on the same page and even making decisions if you're having to adapt to something different?
Communication, I think, is probably the number one step, right? And really helping everybody understand, as any organization is, right? We are all living and operating within a very dynamic environment now. Whether it's the ecosystem that our clients are playing in, whether it's the ecosystem that we're playing in and servicing our clients, and then all the tools and services and so on that we need to support, that support our business delivery. So it really comes down to, how do we understand our customer base? How do we move into that market space, and how do we continue to be nimble? And then more importantly, how do we set goals that can be adaptive over time, but also still somewhat fixed? And then mission statements, right? Those things are very important. I come from a military mindset, so without a mission statement, you don't have a North Star. And even that might change over time, but at least gives a good guiding post and a guiding line of where you're trying to go. And then when you make changes within the organization, you communicate what those changes are and how they map up to the mission statement and why you're making those changes. I think that's probably the most fundamental piece, is really being good and crisp about communicating, and perhaps even over communicating and repeating your communications, so that the understanding is very clear about why the mission might have changed or where the direction might pivot. And being more specific, like us, we're thinking about, do we lean into the government space, for example? There's a lot of organizations that are looking for CMMC credentials, right? It's a very specialized credential to service the government and federal sector, as well as the DoD. NIST frameworks. So those are pivots that we're thinking about, but they still align with our overall mission statement, right? And those are the kind of things that we think through.
Awesome. Well, let me give you a chance to share what your mission statement is.
The overall mission statement is changing right now, and we actually have a leadership offsite next week. But the idea is to be the number one service provider for the startup community, and that is for SOC 2 compliance and then other compliance readiness initiatives.
Awesome. As we talk about mission statements, it's really about brand protection. Is there anything else that you're working on to just make sure that you're growing and protecting your brand at the same time?
It's about the experience that we deliver. I know I keep going back to that, but the brand is the experience, especially when you're a professional services firm. It's about your people and the experience they're delivering to the client. So that really foremost protects the brand. Then, of course, are we providing the right guidance? Are we delivering, sometimes some hard conversations with our clients when they don't want to make the investments? Are we tracking that internally so that we have our own defensible position about, as a security provider, right, as a recommendation firm, professional services in security space? Sometimes you have to be very clear about choices that are made from a risk perspective. And so I'll get a little technical here, but there are things that clients may choose not to do, and we're okay with that, because it's all about risk, but we will have them put things on their risk register so that they understand, and now we are protected as an organization, these certain risks that we've identified that they have chosen to accept versus mitigate because of cost reasons, which makes sense. Did that answer your question? I think that's
Yeah, no, absolutely.
okay.
That was perfect. Talk to me a little bit about what you're seeing with the AI boom right now, how you're navigating around that and just staying sharp.
Really great question, Brenda. And that's, of course, There's many pieces to that question. One is how do we use it internally, and that's certainly something we're doing and we're adopting and even adapting, right? There's ways that we tried it out initially, and I won't talk too much about it, but more to come around that. But certainly how do we use it internally is a big conversation, and certainly big motion behind that to support it. Then our customer base, they are getting demands from their customers about their governance around AI. And do they even have things like an acceptable use policy? And then more specifically, there's a new framework, 42001, ISO 42001, which really defines how do you govern this thing called AI. And yesterday, in fact, I had just met with an audit firm to understand what's their approach to auditing against that very new framework. And even there, it's still very new because their accreditation to be able to go and do those audits is still not yet fully ratified. And so it's a very, very fluid environment, if you will. But the short version is all of our clients have to deal with it. They all need to think about data provenance, and this is something that has historically always been a problem for any organization. Pardon me, even well before AI came into the picture, where is your data? Where does it go? What kind of controls do you have around it? These fundamental concepts are still the same, and they apply to AI more than ever in this notion of data provenance.
Yeah. Well, it really sounds like you're doing a really great job staying on top of that with your clients. I mean, with a topic that, as much as you try to stay two steps ahead, it's almost impossible with AI because it can change it every day. And it continues to get a little, for lack of better words, trickier, I mean, to stay on top of.
It does, Brenda. But what's fun about that, especially where we are right now with the catbird seat, is we are, for our clients, essentially in the driver's seat. And again, by being focused on that startup community and being able to build these foundational components, if we have done a good job, and ISO 27001 is a great fit for that framework I mentioned, 42001. But if we've done a good enough job establishing that framework, then the conversation is much easier for them to have with their clients and for us to have with our clients about where are you going around this world of AI governance? Because you have to think about it and you have to have a story that you can tell, and more importantly, a program that can support it as you scale over time, because it's only going to grow in usage and you must get your arms around it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, yeah. Wow. So, I mean, I commend you for, taking those proactive steps and, just being very forthcoming and transparent with your customers.
It's the luxury of where we sit, and it's really a beautiful spot to be able to, again, especially with the startup community. They've started from scratch. They're looking to us for the guidance. They don't have an infinite budget. Nobody does, even enterprise. But for our clients to be able to sit in this seat and be able to lean on us as the trusted advisors, knowing that we have the ability to help them think through the context of their environment and where they're trying to go, is truly a luxury. And it's not something we ever take for granted.
Nice, nice. So, as far as the offerings, is there one specific, product or service that you feel is, very common among every organization that you speak with?
I would say, and if I look at it from the angle of the bulk of our business, it's going to be SOC 2 readiness. And that's the short version. But in there's a lot of other activities that we do, whether it's looking at architecture reviews as a bolt-on capability, whether it's looking more at identity management and how they're managing permissions associated with identities. Because as I mentioned earlier, all of our organizations, our clients are cloud native and they're startups. And so they've built an environment and application that works but may not be built with security. And so there are things that we need to go through around well-architected principles, depending on which cloud environment they're in. Again, SOC 2 is typically our lead. It's a majority of our business where we go. ISO 27000 is a close runner-up. The healthcare marketplace is another one where we really play quite a bit in, HIPAA, high trust, those kind of things. But here again, it typically leads into, great, we've helped you get the credential. Now we need to think through your architecture and really help you shape up and shore up where you're going and build that roadmap for what you need to tighten up in the future.
Very good. I absolutely love that. Very good. Is there any challenge that you've encountered that you're still in the process of trying to figure out or kind of navigate through?
I mean, you asked about it earlier, AI adoption, right? How do we do that effectively? How does that marry with our goals of being more operationally efficient? And there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, a lot of different tools. Everybody is selling, the latest, greatest project management plus AI, or name your tool, customer service management plus AI, whatever the case may be. So challenge for us is going to be thinking through how do we leverage AI How do we really get the most out of the capability so that we can be more efficient? And I know I keep going back to that, but every business leader is always thinking about efficiency. And for us, we really want to be able to create that experience to be more efficient for our staff because that frees up their time to have more thoughtful dialogue with our clients.
Very good. And that's something that all businesses, let's be honest, are dealing with right now, figuring out which tool to implement, what's the best one, what's going to be the best, from a cost perspective, and really just kind of give them those immediate results.
And even more fun to that question, Brenda, or to that point, is cutting through the marketing noise. And there's a lot of it out there, and we recognize, and I'm sure you recognize as well, that AI, it's an important thing to be able to talk about and to include in your product set. Going back a few years, maybe a decade or so, maybe more than a few years, but the AI versus ML was a thing and was a conversation. And so that still is a bit of a conversation. But the reason I bring all this up is it's yet another advantage we bring to the market in being in the catbird seat because we get to help our clients with vendor evaluations, tool selection. In fact, a couple of our clients we've helped adopt certain AI tools because as we go in and evaluate the technical underpinnings of those services that they're considering, we very quickly see it's not just a native tool that they have and that they own, but it's connected to a lot of other AI services. And now that means the data goes all over the place without subprocessor agreements and all this kind of stuff. So there is a lot to think through when you're just trying to choose and adopt an AI tool, let alone any other tool in the marketplace.
Yeah. And being in a security space, you have a extra level of due diligence to make sure you're choosing the right ones.
You got it, Brenda.
Yeah. Well, you've had, a great journey and, obviously a lot of expertise in the cybersecurity space. What makes you love what you do?
The curiosity. I get to be challenged every single day, no matter how much I've been doing the job. And it's also a humility I bring to the table that I think helps me really appreciate what we do. But every single day, the environments change. Every client's context is different. Every mindset they have is different. And so thinking through those and helping clients navigate the very mysterious waters of cybersecurity and then always recognizing at the end of the day, every client and every organization, ultimately, except for nonprofits, of course, is in business to do business. And security historically has always felt as if they need to have the perfect solutions and they need to have all the money and all the budget in the world, whereas really they've lost sight of the fact that their mission is to support the business. And so when you ask me what keeps me passionate about it, it's how do you blend the idea of a good enough security posture with a business mindset and supporting the business to be enabled to continue to go into the marketplace and deliver their services, their capabilities while doing it securely. So a number of different things, but just the challenge of it and always having to think through different solutions, learning new technology because there's a lot of advancement right now. In fact, I met with a potential vendor of ours this morning who has really fantastic cutting edge technology. So there's a lot of different hats I get to wear in my role. And these are the things that keep me super excited about the industry because there's a lot of change that continues to come.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And, just once again, going back to the customization, it sounds like having to really understand your client's business at a very deep level before you can even recommend something. Is that fair to say?
It is fair to say, and that's the holy grail, I think, for any external professional services firm, because if you do really understand the business, then you really truly get to be perceived as that trusted advisor. And then in that seat, because our job isn't to sell tools or any kind of stuff, it's to be that trusted advisor, to deliver that experience. And so by being able to be agnostic to any kind of tools, but having that expertise to know the tool set, to know the vendor marketplace, or to be able to ask the right questions when new tools come along, like the AI story I mentioned earlier, and then marrying that with the context of our clients' environments is, to me, the luckiest place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, speaks even more highly of the channel partners, because they already have that kind of momentum with the trust going with their clients and understanding the business. They almost pass it off to you. You're able to continue that momentum and then just dive a little bit deeper.
Indeed. And we actually love to work with channel partners for that reason because we'll step back and let them own the entire business relationship and have that entire experience, whereas our job is to really build a security program within the business context. So it's a lot of different ways to play, but channel partners have a great space in that area for us as well.
Yeah. How long does it take you to build out something new like that then for each individual customer that you get?
The program itself,
Mm-hmm.
It all depends on which, so we have a number of different tiers, number of different packages. So it depends what they sign up for. But the short answer would be anywhere from 3 to 6 months to nail up a good foundation. And then from there, we build on top.
Yeah, that's probably pretty average, so that's great.
And you have to match startup speed. Right? So if you're talking about building something for a year or 9 months I mean, by then they may not still be in business, right? And so you have to think through the fact, what round of funding are they in and where are they trying to go in the marketplace? And then let's right size and build that program. And then, of course, scale it over time.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that about the startup speed. Very valid point.
Yeah.
Very good. So, what excites you for the rest of 2025?
Thinking through how we're going to really adapt and move into more frameworks and move into more scale, if you will, because we are at an inflection point as an organization. And so that's why we have our great leadership offsite that we're about to do, and really thinking through what does the second half of 2025 look like? How do we I mentioned earlier, we got tool selection we're thinking through. How do we leverage those tools? How do we deploy those tools? I have other partnerships that I'm looking into. How do I maybe perhaps exploit some of those and bring those to the table from a technology perspective so that I can deliver more services? So those are some of the things I'm thinking through. Me personally in my role of running cyber services, as well as us as an organization.
Yeah, very good. Well, awesome. Well, I guess, is there anything else that you would just like to share about Eden and in your journey?
I think for Eden Data, keep your eye on us because there's a lot of things that we're doing. We're going to continue to scale. There's a lot of great partnerships we have. There's other things we're going to announce here in the near future about new services that we're going to release. And for me specifically, it's really keeping an eye on things that I'm working on because I'll be announcing some more stuff around that. Because it's really, again, my mindset from the very beginning, if you happen to listen and hung with us this long, the idea is it's all about building a risk-based, resilient cybersecurity program. And what I mean by that is very specifically, let's be realistic as security advisors to all of our clients. And whoever your client is, whether it is startup, whether it's large enterprise, whatever the case is, everybody has limited budgets. Let's be smart security advisors. Let's push the edge of what it means to really stop becoming that stop sign and actually finding a way to say yes, but, right? There's ways to say yes and to design solutions that match the risk appetite, that match the context of the organization, and then you can think through compensating controls. So those would be my big takeaways or leave behinds.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Everyone, keep an eye out for Eden. And where can people reach out to you specifically if they would like to connect with or receive more information?
Sure, you can find me on LinkedIn, Dominic Singer, or at Eden Data. You can reach out to us, sales at Eden Data, Dom at Eden Data, and then we'll all be engaged in conversations.
Well, thank you so much for being a guest on the show today, and have a great rest of your day.
Awesome, Brenda. Thank you for the time.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
Bye.